And we've got some breaking social media news for you off the top. Facebook has just announced another massive data breach. Over 30 million Facebook users' data have been compromised by hackers. Facebook's not releasing any more information about the story at the moment, but we will bring it to you as we learn it. Moving on now, though, staying with Facebook, we're taking a look at the social media company's crackdown on alternative media, an effort which reached new heights this week. On Thursday, the social media giant announced it shut down more than 800 U.S. accounts it describes as political spam. Facebook announced in a blog post, quote, "Today we're removing 559 pages and 251 accounts that have consistently broken our rules against spam and coordinated inauthentic behavior. As we get better at uncovering these kinds of abuses, the people behind it, whether economically or politically motivated, will change their tactics to evade detection. It's why we continue to invest heavily to prevent this kind of misuse." While this may sound like the company is protecting you in theory, in practice, Facebook used the opportunity to eliminate extremely popular alternative media sites. First up, the Free Thought Project. Founded in 2013, the website describes itself as a hub for free thinking conversations and has garnered a 3.1 million strong following. The group's name really says it all. Free thought is apparently not allowed on Facebook. Similarly, news aggregate site The Anti-Media was removed. The page posts articles covering everything, basically from U.S. politics to critiques of the mainstream media to police brutality. Though apparently police accountability is not a priority for Facebook, as multiple pages dedicated to exposing law enforcement were also swept up in the purge, including Cop Block, Police the Police, and Filming Cops, which each have millions of followers. Earlier, we spoke to Ian Freeman from Cop Block. Here's what he had to say.
So Facebook, of course, is a privately run company, and they can do whatever they want with their rules. It sucks, especially after you've had a page that's generated, I don't know how many, I think it was up to probably 1 million plus likes, and it sucks to have all that just thrown down the drain. But that's the world we live in. I think the best solution that groups like Cop Block and others should look at is decentralization. Instead of relying on these big mega corporations, use alternatives like the Mastodon platform, which does basically what Twitter does, but without anybody who's centrally in control of it. So I think that rather than begging or pleading Facebook to change their mind, people just need to create the alternatives.
But it's not just large outlets that were censored. Individual people had their accounts frozen as well, including RT America's very own Rachel Blevins, who's built a fan base of nearly 70,000 people. Rachel took to Twitter on Thursday to declare, quote, "Facebook took down my page, labeling it as spam, when I've spent 4 years working to build that page and using it to post the articles I wrote and videos of my reporting. This is so incredibly wrong and is affecting hundreds of similar pages." With Facebook censorship in question, we're joined now by our live panel. Daniel MacAdams, Executive Director of the Ron Paul Institute, joins us. Alex Rubenstein, a journalist from Sputnik News, is here as well. So is Rachel Blevins, who you just heard me mention in that introduction. She's the RT America reporter, actually, who had her account taken down as part of all of this. Let's go to you first, Rachel. You're accused by Facebook of posting spam and engaging in coordinated inauthentic behavior. Is that actually what you did with your page?
You know, not at all. Like I said on Twitter, this is a page that I've worked for the last 4 years to build up, and it's a page that I basically post content on that I have created, or I'll post breaking news updates. It's something that everything I post has been researched, it's fact-based, and it's all news-related. So for Facebook to say that, and especially in such a vague way where they didn't point to any certain post or anything like that, is really just bizarre, and it's also really frustrating.
Yes, and I can vouch for the fact that you're a very hard-working journalist. All of us who work with you in the newsroom see that, so it's curious that Facebook would say it can just call you something like spam. Now, Alex, this purge came about a month after Twitter banned right-wing commentator Alex Jones for life, following similar moves by Facebook and YouTube. At the time, many people looked the other way and kind of said, well, his views are so offensive, mine aren't, so I'll never be impacted by this kind of censorship. What's your response to that?
Well, you know, it's funny, Anya, because I noticed that the mainstream journalists had absolutely nothing to say about this, and when they did, it was just just ridiculing Alex Jones and actually ridiculing anyone who said that Alex Jones should not have been banned. And what that signifies to me is a level of groupthink that's really reaching dangerous levels. I mean, for example, now, if you want to report on Alex Jones's influence, if you want to report on any of the influence of any of these other pages, or you know, you're at a loss because you can't go back and see all these public records. It's just the deletion of information. It's censorship, and people are somehow okay with it. And apparently, if you're against the deletion of information, then you're sticking your neck out for a fascist conspiracy theorist, which is, I mean, whatever your political views, the deletion of information from public domains like that is dangerous.
Let's bring in Daniel, because Facebook says it's working to invest in efforts to prevent so-called misuse. We know already, however, that it's working, for example, with the NATO-backed Atlantic Council think tank to determine what's propaganda and what's not. So who do you think they're going to come for next, Daniel?
Well, the first thing is these sites are not fake, at least the ones that I'm familiar with. At the Ron Paul Institute, we've republished things from the Free Thought Project. We've published things from Cop Block, the Anti-Media, all excellent sites, very, very good quality stuff. What they have in common, the ones I'm familiar with, is that they often oppose the real one-party state in Washington, D.C. They challenge the drug war, they challenge the police state, they challenge the constant warfare state in a way that the mainstream media does not do. In that sense, they are a great service for America. We should be happy, but what the government's done has outsourced its censorship. It knows because of the First Amendment they can't just go and crack down. So as you started out saying, Anya, they contracted with the Atlantic Council in May. The Atlantic Council is a U.S. government-funded entity. So this is U.S. government money going to censor the American media. And as such, the argument that this is just a private company, I think, is starting to wear pretty thin.
Yeah, Rachel, you mentioned how hard you worked to build your platform, and 70,000 followers is a huge amount. So how did it feel to lose all of that in one night? And has Facebook given you any indication that you'll get it back or how you can go about doing it?
Right, so that was incredibly frustrating, and it was also weird to see that it wasn't tied to any sort of post. It just seemed to be all about my page. They did give a place where I could submit an appeal, and I went through that process. However, they didn't give any kind of timeline for when it would be approved, or even if it would be approved, or any guarantee that I would get all of that content back and be able to still post on that page.
Why do you think you were targeted?
That's a great question. I honestly don't know. I mean, everything that I post, like I said, it's all based on research, but it also does question the mainstream, and I try to go for angles that aren't mentioned in the mainstream media. That's something I think is really important, and something that we talk a lot about on your show and here at RT. And so for them to come against that and to target that, I mean, it really makes me wonder if it's based on the content and just on the fact that it's not following the mainstream narrative.
Yeah, and if they're going after you, really any one of us could be next. Alex, I thought it was interesting because social media was really credited for the way it could be used to document police excessive use of force, and it was even given credit for fueling movements like the Black Lives Matter movement we saw under the Obama administration. What does it tell us now, then, that these pages specifically designed to monitor police are the first ones shut down? I
think it's a reassertion of corporate power, really. I mean, absolutely, social media, Facebook and Twitter especially, really brought the calls, the demands of the Black Lives Matter movement, the footage of the protests. Everybody was able to view that stuff, and it became viral and accessible in a way that was very easy to resonate with. And what we're seeing now, actually, Facebook in a lot of ways has tried to lessen the impact of this over the years, if not outright ban them, which is what they're doing now, of course. But what we're seeing now is like a total crackdown on dissenting views. It started with the January 2017 ODNI report on RT and Sputnik, which was, half of it was about RT and Sputnik, and most of it was garbage. And then with Propernaut, this blacklist of alternative websites that toe the Kremlin line, and meanwhile none of them really had anything to do with Russia at all. And so it's what we're seeing again now is the use of the Russia scare to crack down on very American dissent. and it's going to have dangerous consequences going forward, and it's not going to be easy to study looking back.
Right, because all the information is being eliminated. Daniel, these companies at the end of the day, as we've been talking about, are private corporations which say they can kick any one of us off at any time. They don't owe us anything. Do you feel that Facebook and Twitter should have the right to regulate private platforms that are so widely used? They really do feel like a public space.
Well, I'm certainly against the government getting involved in this because the government is thrilled that these sites are taken down. Trust me, they don't want cop block. They don't want sites questioning the U.S. empire. But the issue is increasingly whether these are genuinely private companies. You know, the previous speaker talked about the corporations. I think that's only seeing half the picture, because as we learned, of course, from the Snowden revelations in 2013, Facebook, among other social media sites, was lavishly funded by the NSA to participate in the PRISM program, mass surveillance of Americans. So if these companies are getting billions of dollars directly or indirectly from us, the taxpayers, at what point do we start saying, maybe these aren't such private corporations. Maybe there's another word to describe it. Maybe it's corporatism. Maybe it's fascism.
Or maybe these websites should be treated in another way altogether. There are different sides of this argument, Alex. I don't know. What do you say to people who point out this contradiction?
I mean, I think that there's an argument to nationalize it. I don't think that under this government that would end particularly well. But if we're looking for a word for it, I think the perfect word is neoliberalism, because neoliberalism literally means the outsourcing of the responsibilities that traditionally belong to the government to the private sector. And so as far as domain over public spheres, I think Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube, Google, all these social media companies certainly fit that criteria.
And Rachel, I just want to give you the chance to tell viewers again how you've individually been impacted by this and what you think people should be asking and questions should be raised at this time.
Absolutely. So, I mean, Facebook, when I started out in this industry, Facebook was the go-to place for journalists who really wanted to build a following and wanted to share their content. And so the idea that Facebook is censoring journalists and just taking down their content really, I think, sets a dangerous precedent, because it doesn't matter what side of the aisle you're on or what, political party you stand with, if any at all. But just the idea that Facebook is coming for journalists, I think, is really dangerous, because journalists are the ones who are supposed to be holding the government accountable, and a lot of this, I know with my page, I have a lot of different content that I share, but when you see pages like Police the Police that's taken down, I mean, that's a major police accountability
with millions of followers.
Exactly, and those people are following this page because it's showing a side that the mainstream media won't show, and that's the same with the Free Thought Project. I mean, these are places where millions of people are going because they want that additional angle, and they're sick of the mainstream media narrative. And so I think just what Facebook is doing right now sets a very dangerous precedent, and it's something that people need to start talking about. Even if it's not happening to them specifically, it still is a really important topic.
And it's difficult because this is happening after all of us have been kind of roped in to the point that we're dependent on these platforms. All of us at the Ron Paul Institute, Sputnik, independently or as part of RT, use these social media companies to get information out or to find information for ourselves. And so now we're really left with, what do we do? What do we do next? I hope that we at least see your case resolved and these other issues resolved soon, because we don't want you to lose out on your followers. But unfortunately, I don't see this getting better anytime in the near future. Alex Rubenstein, Rachel Blevins, and Daniel MacAdams, thank you both all so much for coming on today. And we're going to take a short break, but we'll be right back with some international news. Stay tuned.
Hey YouTube, thanks for checking out our channel. We hope you enjoyed the video. We have tons of content for you just like this. For more of RT America's one-of-a-kind news and analysis, be sure to subscribe and never stop questioning more.